she had confidence that I can do anything in the world. It is a very inspirational statement for me and challenge for me that how can I make her, how can I help her to grow with the organization.
It would be really nice if you could all move forward.
लाइट कलर में जिनकी आंखें कमजोर है वो काम नहीं कर सकते.
I'm not really a girl, maybe my dream job will be all back to the Sapphire 1 and 2 hosted by Jaipur Rugs for our second day of technical sessions as a part of the ARCASIA, 19th ARCASIA Forum. I hope that all of you have been making the most of what we as a chapter and host have to offer to you all, and I hope you've all gone and seen the exhibition showcase, which exhibits a lot of materials here. And no event can be a success without the sponsors who kindly help us out and become a very big part of an event like this. Jaipur Rugs is one such sponsor, and they have been our hall hosts. I now call upon Yogesh Chaudhary, Director of Jaipur Rugs, who's here to represent Jaipur Rugs and make a small presentation to you about his infrastructure. Yogesh.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chaudhary. I represent Jaipur Rugs. So I'll just walk you through quickly in the little time that we have very quickly about the company. The company was started by my father in 1978 with rupees 5,000 that he borrowed from his father, from my grandfather. That the quality was exceptional. So he was always spending a lot of time at the looms, trying to make great quality, and he was able to expand pretty quickly in the business. And until 1986, he was trying to selling only to Indian exporters, but started to export directly with his brother in 1986. The interesting biggest difference between Jaipur Rugs and most of the other carpet manufacturers is there are a lot of middlemen in the carpet business. What Jaipur Rugs did was we cut out a lot of the middlemen, so we go directly to the artisan. So a weaver that works for Jaipur Rugs doesn't have to get out of his home. So we deliver the material to their doorsteps, we provide the loom, everything, so that, and the money on a monthly basis, so that they don't have to get out of their houses essentially to work for us. And out of the 40,000 artisans that currently work for the company, over 90% are women who are working from their home. We moved to Gujarat in 1989 and set up an artisan base of over 15,000 tribal people in Gujarat. So the company essentially has three companies: the company that manufactures in India, a distribution company in the US, which sells to over 3,000 architects and interior designers just in America alone. And then we have a foundation. So we do a lot of work with the World Bank, with the Indian government, with the British government to make a difference in the lives of the weavers in the villages. We've done some very interesting collection. On the extreme left, if you look at that red carpet, was one of the first collections, which was called Project Error and Chaos. The first one was called Chaos Theory, which was inspired by chaos and nature. And the second one was celebrating errors that exist in our day-to-day life. So if you look around the hall, there are many of the rugs that we try to display here to just show you some of the work that we do. This design won the German Design Award, the first company in India to actually win a German Design Award, which was inspired by a foil essentially, so translated a foil design into carpet design. This collection we launched this year in January called Unstring, inspired by threads. And this is the only collection ever in the history to win an international collection award in India. I mean, it won an award in Germany. So one of the pieces of this collection is displayed on the right as soon as you enter, the extreme right. Again, we launched a collection with the artisans, so we wanted the artisans to inspire and have them design their own rugs. So we launched a collection called the Artisan Originals, where the artisans themselves were doing one-of-a-kind pieces. And this rug, if you see at the bottom, there are three parts where three different weavers started to weave. And as they started going up, they started to talk to each other and coordinate a little better. So towards the end of the rug, you see that the design coordinates a little more. So this is a story of how three weavers essentially started not interacting very well with each other, but when you go at the top, they started talking and coordinating on the rug, so the design is in symmetry. So this design actually also won the German Design Award and has been featured in a lot of magazines across the globe. This one actually was a finalist at one of the biggest award functions, again done by a weaver. So weaver designed this rug herself, and being presented at the top platform in the world of a design award. The rug being held by the family that did the rug in the village. She's again a special artisan who did a beautiful story and an amazing message, which is right behind. So if you have time, please read the message. I'm going to skip in interest of time right now. We've won a lot of international awards, from the German Design Awards to a lot of Indian awards to annual awards, annual art awards across continents in the world. And the key story behind our company is essentially finding yourself through losing yourself. So it's a very people-centric company where we want to discover ourselves by, kind of helping other people rather than trying to do everything for ourselves. Just different examples of people visiting our villages. And we have a program where we'd like to invite you to visit our villages. So we have a sign up outside. So I'd encourage all of you to participate and see and meet the weavers, the beautiful women weavers that we have. Thank you very much.
Yogesh, Kavita and Chaudhary Saab are some of the most pleasant people I've ever met, and it is with immense thanks for their sponsorship that I call Yogesh back to stage, and I invite Gaurav Agarwal, a practicing architect and IAA Rajasthan chapter secretary, to please felicitate Yogesh on our behalf. Sorry for that 20-second delay. So we are back to our knowledge sharing, learning, deliberation and dialogue. And we start with this day's proceedings with a thought-provoking sub-theme, community design and lifestyle changes. And for you, we have lined up some really amazing and eminent speakers. We first have architect Kamal Malik. Architect Kamal Malik is an alumni of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and in a career of more than 3 decades. Next on, we have architect Peter Rich. He is the founder of Peter Rich Architects. Peter Rich himself is a great contributor to the creation of authentic contemporary African architecture. Honorary Fellow of American Institute of Architects and RIBA, he co-founded Kigali, a Rwanda-based practice, Light Earth Design, LED, in 2012. He's the director of international masterclasses and expands his learnings through teaching both in Africa and across the world. He won the World Building of the Year in 2009 for the Makungwe Interpretation Center, so I hope I got that right, amongst many others. We welcome you, sir. I request you if you could just, and I request the audience to put your hands together for sir. We then have architect Shin Chung-yu, honorary member of AIA. He is the principal architect of CGS Architects and Associates. He did his master's from The Ohio State University in 1987 and is also the director of International Committee at Kira. With over 20 years of working experience, he's also an active member in the teaching community, being the adjunct professor at the Yonsei University at Seoul. He has also worked at the Union International des Architects, the UIA. Sir, we welcome you, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Yeah. And last but not the least, we have architect Tong Zhang. Architect Tong Zhang is a member of the Architectural Society of China, the ASC. With over 25 years of teaching experience, he's a deputy dean at the School of Architecture, Southeast University, and he said that's enough to introduce me. Sir, it's an honor to have you. I request the audience to give a sound round of applause for all our speakers before I call upon our first. I now call upon Architect Kamal Malik to start the proceedings for us. Architect Malik.
The infinite is very much part of Eastern thought. You never conclude anything, and all life is cyclical. a little sconce, which is interesting, as you enter, came out of a small chapel. It is an old piece that came out of a church, which I picked up from the shop, and there's a little bit of tinkling sound of water. As there is on the axis a rose garden, the attempt to address all the senses. We normally talk only of the eyes, but then all the other senses need to be addressed. And somewhere, one has through this first project, 3.5 decades ago, begun that journey of beginning to address all the senses. Yeah, and the courts, you can see, we check the roots. So you can find that that tree right in front of you, the beautiful scigraphy as the sun moves, and another tree beyond, and another tree beyond. But the wall has come so close that the foundation on the site was sketched, so they were eccentric, and therefore the tree stood there. But then it seems to be almost hugging that wall. And court, another court, space beyond. These are typical examples of the simplest, and that little niche you can see as you're entering through the door has a small Ganesha. Now this is something which is also auspicious, and you bring in these little symbols which are timeless. That dome was done. It was an exercise for me to first design it, and this is structural domes. These are not tiles which are stuck onto the underside of concrete. It was done with proper shuttering, and each one of them went around. We could incorporate lighting into it and so on. And that's okay. We'll shift gear. The time is short. This is 2 decades ago. I'm really into the past, apart from one small job which I will run into the current. We're just going along a journey. So interspersed. This is the research center on a hill outside Pune for Lupin, a very well-known pharma firm. And you can see this is a summer shot. The entire complex almost seems to be the earth flowing out of the hill and forming that wall. There is no attempt at any kind of forced architecture or form or shape of buildings. And that hill is to the south because you get the afternoon sun which gets cut off there, and the slope of the site is towards the north, south to north. So it's respected the slopes, it has worked around a series of courtyards, and there is no attempt at formalizing form. This is the Katras, not the Katras, the Vadas of Pune, which were the traditional dwellings in that part of the country. You can see the right plan. And there was a series of courts. They were larger, smaller, they were being scaled, and were based on use and based on the proportion of the lateral space to the vertical space. Now, this is the plan. On the left is the south, which is the admin block. This is literally the head. And the rest of it, as it flows through and becomes a simple mandala, or the Hindu mandala, which is a planned diagram form, a man's relationship with the cosmos. It's a symbol of it. And the labs went around. Of course, the connectivities, I won't bother to get into details of the service connectivity and so on, which is quite complex. But in the center, we actually came through with all the common facilities, the amphitheater, the library, the dining spaces, because I realized that the scientists, when I studied a little bit closer, they were introverted. They didn't want somebody to look at their paper. They would look at like this. And I wanted to force them to meet each other, to exchange views, even though they were sometimes working on diverse projects. So the whole, and you'll see it as we go along, that the walkways, the sense of trying to bring about a communication. And there we come to 4 very interesting words. They are intellect, instinct, intelligence, and intuition. There are 4 I's which I have tried to study all my life. And you find the ultimate creativity comes out of the last, which comes from within. Yes, you can get all the external factors and so on and so forth, but finally the breakthrough, something creative, that little stanza of poetry maybe comes from inside. So how do you cultivate intuitive thought in these researchers? What kind of environment do you give them? Of course, close to nature, speaking to nature. This is the main axis. The various simple diagram. Now, a few images which actually show you, and fenestrations were precisely measured because the climate gets very hot. The rainfall is not huge, which you will see how we've used that particular element. And there are thick cavity walls which are insulated. Again, something which I tend to do is I sketch a lot. I'm nowhere near, not even 10% of my brother from Africa who's sitting there, Peter. He's an amazing sketcher, but I tend to do these little sketches and frames, maquettes, to understand the sense of composition and the use of color which can be brought in. It's like the bindi on the forehead. Sometimes you put a small red dot and it's a wonderful sense of composition that you see. So this ability to understand the sky, the hill, the almost neutral material of construction, which you can see is almost mud on the right, and then how you work with color. That's the amphitheater. Now again, lots of spaces where these scientists can meet and informally discuss. Water has been water, how it's been used. I'll have to race you by this because there's two. How water has been used, timeless aqueducts. I will break here even though I'm asking for 2 more or 3 more minutes, but I've often told them that in India, they take 10 minutes to unveil the instrument and then, before they start playing. We're in no hurry here. Okay. So just some fleeting images, quick ones. Sculpture designed by me, showing the fate of the human being, the inverted torso. This is how the sun starts to talk to the building. And you can actually gauge the time of the day if you are in a particular space. Common spaces, the levels, how they mix with the kund, which is timeless. Okay. We did a small project which was an old colonial home, but the main project was a research center for a German company. So since time is short, I will go in. So first was to demolish the colonial home was the brief. The Germans are quite severe. Out with this. And we kept it, restored it, and then worked around the research center. I'll quickly run you, and you will see that was the old thing. It was a huge go-down, which was actually cleaned up, and we restored it, and then added a few things to it. And this was an insertion, because I found Professor Figala, who was the director of the institute, myself had 2 things in common. He says, I'm learning meditation. So he actually used to climb up there, and there's no railing if you see. The entire walk is precarious and risky, which is the whole subject of meditation anyway. You lose yourself finally. And the little courtyard, which we actually built these walls around that existing house to give a sense of enclosure, and that his dog wouldn't run away. Quick images. And that's the research institute, which was quite Miesian because there were trees, heavy trees, dense trees. So that side and this side, both sides we had trees. So we simply built a Miesian box and then built the complex around it. Just run you by quick images, because I do want to quickly run you by the last project. now we are on to the last one. This Peter is familiar with. He's the only person in this gathering who's been here. I've had the, for the good fortune of Peter spending an afternoon with us here. This is basically our house, just been built very close to Bombay, in the hills at Lonavala. And quickly raise you back. This is surrounded by 5 forts. Shivaji, the legendary warrior, there are 5 of his forts built with the local stone. And you can see the beauty, and how they've been perched on top of the hills surrounding. Our site, cross on the left as a blob. An aerial view taken by, now that's our site. That's the Tungi Fort, which is right next to us. Logard is across the water, there's a lake. And it's a very, very steeply banked site. So we had 3 large water bodies that run from the hill and plow through the site. They're almost like rivers in the monsoon. And they've been left intact. And we built the house pretty much keeping those in mind, all the existing trees. It's dense forest. That's the kind of section. Between the topmost part and the lowest part of the house is 7 floors. That's the axonometrics. I will not worry about that. I want to run you by the images. These are some of the construction shots where we actually followed the way the trees were around us and used the tree trunk and the branches as a methodology of organic kind of construction, while the rest of the composition is around huge stone walls, which are quarried from stone only 500 meters away and are actually an echo of Shivaji's forts.
Such a pleasant walk it was through Kamal sir's memories and the images, and it was such a shame that we had to run through the last few, but it's now, I take immense pleasure in inviting architect Peter Rich to please come up on stage and make his presentation on building community, the village in the city in the village.
Right, is this on? Is it on? Yes, thank you. I want to thank the organizers for bringing me here to share with you and bringing me to teach. I was teaching in the city, examining the Havalis with the School of Architecture. I normally try and teach wherever I go. It's also the best way to learn. I'm a sort of student who's beginning. I treat myself that way. I'm going to pick up where Doshi almost left off. And we have this responsibility. We talk about housing, but the housing housing is like the fist. The two fingers are housing. One is the support buildings, the other is the open space, and the other one is the infrastructure. It's not just housing. And we have a responsibility as architects to engage with serving the needs of the other. And I'm going to look at India first. When I leave here in 2 days' time, I'm making a pilgrimage to Doshi's housing to learn, because it deals with transition before transformation, and it has an open-endedness. And there are very few architects who manage to do that successfully. And I think this is one of the most successful schemes. So I'm not going to dwell on it because it's been dealt with already. And I looked at, I made the internal spaces red so you can actually see them, but I'm interested in the way people transform. And where do you start? What do you give to start with? Because it's all we can afford. And then I will be visiting this housing in Mumbai, as well as seminal examples by two great architects to address this very same problem. And I've just been commissioned to advise on 27 secondary and tertiary towns in East Africa and in Rwanda, where it's people who can't get a bond. They're poor people, but how do you plan for their future? Because they have to become urbanized because there's not enough space. And they live in compounds. They're not used to urbanization. So how do you responsibly deal with that transition? And what I do is I give you one example here. I'm here on a learning trip. I'm a student. This is Kwai Dungawala and his partner Shilpa of Dikoop. They did some housing at the steel mill north of Mumbai, and they looked at the chawl and they looked at the workers' housing, and then they came up with a remarkable complex that just works so much better. They grouped it around a courtyard. There's social spaces. There's an otla that you can get up on when you go outside into the ground floor. There's a balcony. There's cross movement of air. There's a central space with two rooms that can be dining room or eating, and there's an eating facility and a bathing facility on the other side, and a neutral space and a corridor. If you take the Smithson's idea, they were teachers of mine, the idea of signs of occupancy, and you start looking at how this is occupied, you realize there's a sense of pride and there's a love in the people staying there. Now I think if we as architects can do an enabling, low-cost architecture that actually facilitates and helps people and they love it, we're achieving something. And I think this young firm actually does that remarkably, because when you go there and you see how people are using it, and you see the pleasure of use it gives them, it's quite remarkable. And then we have, hopefully in the audience, we have Anita and Vinood, who are from Calicut, who have two practices. They spoke yesterday with their Center of Gender Equality and Transgender Equality in Calicut, and they got an honorary mention last night. But they have another company which is called Good Earth, and Good Earth acquires land, and then they become the architect developer. And on a third of an acre of land here, you drive up a little panhandle, you park your cars, and when you come out, you go change level and you go into a social space where you have to meet your, and then you go up through a number of changes of level. I've colored in their house. From the kitchen, you can see the front door. All the body language is like they have 16 families with 3-bedroom flats around a courtyard. This is the sort of density we're going to have to design, and the new generation of students is going to design. I've actually got students from my class with the Havelis in Jaipur saying, let's remove the building and see what you would do if you were actually dealing with contemporary needs. I think this is a remarkable complex. And then you have changes of level. I try to get my office to deal with the subtleties of the changes of level. But it's the changes of level and the staircases and the possibilities and the differences and the options that you have that make it delightful to live in. And when the architects took me there, it was their early project. They started apologizing about the architecture because they were so keen to actually get the social dimension right. But the people actually love it. And Vinood's parents came from a farm and they live urbanly, and he brings vegetables and they send it up on baskets and all the people on the roof eat. So this is the sort of model for middle-class living that I'm learning from India. And then they've done another scheme which goes to 28 units. What is the number you have to go to on a tight site to lose the sense of community? What is that number? I don't believe in high-rise, because what you do is you actually smash families, okay? and you actually pigeonhole people. And I'm not going to go into this in great deal, but when they got to 28, they then did some villas and they sold it off, and the money they make from these projects, they channel into their space art project, which is where they do community work. So they're a wonderful model of a couple who are looking at an alternative way that architects can take control and practice. Okay? And they've got into a more sophisticated language, and it's really very nice. And they involve craft, and they do all the things we talk about. Now we move to Africa. What's happening in Africa? Where certain cities in the developed world had 120 to 150 years to develop since the motor car, we're having cities that grow in 12 to 15 years at the same pace, making all the mistakes. And what I'm trying to do as an advisor to the Rwandan government, at least, is I'm looking at how Rwandans live. And Bill Clinton said to His Excellency the President, change is going to come, and if you, through your aspirations, want to be like the Porsche showroom or what you see in TV, or like Singapore, you're going to lose your identity. And it's exactly what's happened. So I've been called in like an urban paramedic to make good to that. And I've looked at how Rwandans live in a rural situation and how they live in an urban situation, organically housing themselves, and then tried to see what different type of housing conditions we can actually, as architects, maybe deliver for them. That one was we can't do developments at 35 units per hectare, which is a single house. We have to go to at least 100, and this goes to 220, all on sloping sites, okay? And how can you integrate green? How can you actually make spaces that work? And this is a project that's waiting to be built. It's ground floor and 3 stories. We have urban agriculture, and in Rwanda you have a unique situation. On the 3rd Saturday, the last Saturday of every month, the entire country for 4 hours from 8 to 12 shuts down, and everyone goes and cleans the public domain. They trim it and they clean it. So you know when you do public domain, it's actually going to work. This is commissioned by the government. The problem is it's a government construction company, but you do it for a low-end market because we're trying to get at the bottom end of the triangle. And what they want their profit. So with their profit, they push it into affordable housing, which is again in the top end of the pyramid, where it's affordable for people who can get mortgage bonds. So it's like a losing battle. But we keep trying. And we try and show good precedent because we've got first-generation people. There's the Rambo when you come in. There's a sense of entry. There's the importance of the courtyard. There's the importance of doing certain functions on a balcony that are cooking as opposed to inside. Because we all have to sleep, we all have to wash our bodies and clothes, and we have to eat. But it's the nuances of culture. We are equal, but we are different, and the difference is what I find interesting. This is housing I did in South Africa, where we pigeonhole people into townships, and I suddenly introduced the idea of double stories. I told them you don't need this funny configuration. If you move with the contours, you can save $15 million US, but there was vested interests. But it has to do with how you have a starter house. You build it 6 meters by 6 meters. You provide an electricity point, a plumbing point, and then you let the people take it and run with it, and they can even double their own density. So you provide services. It's a learning curve. Okay, and it's amazing what people can do, because as they become economically mobile, they can do it. And unfortunately in Rwanda, they're wanting to build housing. I said, you have no manufacturing industry, you landlocked, you get all your goods across 2 corrupt countries and a corrupt port. Everything's 9 times the price. You need to actually have local product, which you need to do, and then we start looking at green alternatives, light earth design. We start looking at different models using recyclable materials, using hay that you've grown, which you get a German firm to compress into boards, so that you can, without any glue and without any toxins. So we're trying to reinvent a landlocked country that has limited resources. And I'm trying to say to them, you need to do site and services projects with typologies that people can grow, like on the outskirts of Mexico, where you build a room 4.5 by 4.5 meters, and it's amazingly the resourcefulness of people. It's this business that you need transition before you have transformation. People's non-architectural organic responses. This is in a Haveli in Jaipur when I was last year. The street edge, the otlar that brings you up into the courtyard, the sense of public space, and it's just one of those wonderful examples. And I find when you sketch, you become more articulate, and then when you draw the section, you become more articulate. And I get students to draw plan and section, because without plan and section, you can't become an architect. And they've got computer programs that are telling them to do form. It has nothing to do with form. And these are the lessons that you actually learn. And then we went to Anagudi between Badami and Hampi, where I paid a pilgrimage to. And we're actually looking at what ordinary people, sometimes with architects, sometimes without, are doing to change. And then we visited this Chalkote village in Badami with a colleague of mine. We measured the public space and the dark building there. We were busy sketching. And the owner said, why don't you come in? And he said, look, my grandparents had their cattle downstairs, and they slept on an intermediate level, and they had a cooking thing in a yard. And I just want to show you, I did some drawings, how we've adapted. That's what the parents had, and we measured that it was actually 18 feet by another distance. We've enclosed the yard, we've put in a double story, we've put in something up to the courtyard. I just really find it remarkable how people, ordinary people, adapt. We as architects have difficulty. And Doshi, with all due respects, is the one architect who I find deals with, as part of diversity, that idea that you believe in what people can do. You plant the seed, and then you enable them to do it. And he's done it wonderfully. And these people live a contemporary lifestyle, and they're very, very proud of it. And they spoke to us about the technology, which is a series of branches, which has then got leaves, overlapping leaves, and it's then got sand, and then it's got overlapping leaves. And I'm busy doing some earth houses, which are entirely built out of earth, which I'm building in China, I'm building in Africa, in extreme climatic conditions, just to test. And the beauty of this, the beauty of the structure when you actually come in, and how people have adapted to change. And when you go inside, the incredible ingenuity of how they actually make art out of the one particular support structure, and the kitchen. And the shrine. I told the students when we were measuring up in town, look where people pray, look where they wash. Look at those signs, learn from them, because they're actually a wonderful part of that very diverse thing that was spoken about, because we're dealing with habitat, and we're dealing with process, and we're dealing with flexibility and ambiguity and uncertainty. I love the concept of uncertainty. The West has this concept of certainty and perfection, which is a false construct. Uncertainty is more creative. And then recently, a mining company has blown up the earth and created 30-meter walls of earth that are advancing on indigenous people who have ritual practice. When you arrive, you have the place of the men, you have the place of the woman, you have a series of transitional thresholds. And what they're doing is they're taking these people who have ritual practice, and when you go into a home, the right-hand side of the home is female, the left-hand side of the home is male, and they're dumping them in this situation. And what they're doing is they're actually smashing family. And they're positioning the building so that they can't grow, and it complies with international World Bank standards of square meterage and everything. But what it does is it creates redundant outdoor space. And what we've done is we've done a very simple thing to human rights lawyers. These are diagrams, it's not architectures. We said, what if you take almost the same house, and you do a starter house, and you make it a semi-detached house that can actually grow? And it forms a forecourt, and it forms an inner court and a back court. So every bit of outside space, because the in-between space for Africans is as important as the internal space, works. And then you can put an extended family opposite one another in adjoining sites. And what we're doing now is we've now got a commission to design community, not just to do the houses. So it has to do, and what you do is you provide a 45 square meter house, and you provide services, and then you let people take it from there. So these are little moves. I did these very quickly before I came. They're diagrams, they're not architecture. And then what we do when I interrogate space, I interrogate how people use space, the backyards, the internal yards, how the movement actually happens. This is in Rwanda. The idea of veranda, the idea of terrace, the idea of backcourt, the idea of alleyway. Because it's what gets lost in the simplistic buildings that have to do with impatient capitalism that come in and knock buildings like a peg into the ground, and when they get to the ground, they don't resolve anything. The resourcefulness in section to use a steep slope and how to change elevation. and how people actually adapt on their own to situations, and how you get the alleyways and the way they actually deal with water and how they deal with infrastructure in a tight situation. That's how Rwandans are ingenious. But planners in that turn a blind eye and come with some model that they've seen somewhere else. There's this incredible thing that happens in new democracies. They want to be like somewhere else. It's like being in a relationship where the partner you're in a relationship with is trying to be someone else. The relationship won't last, and neither will the city. So what I do is I just do these drawings, and through the drawings I show it's not just the drawing, it's the analysis you do after the drawing. It's the plan and the section, and then it's the cross movement of air, and then it's the social structure, and then it's the cultural structure, and culture is what's really important. Here you've got two ships, boats, which have a boom, and they put candles on, they put lanterns on the end, and you hang your net and you catch fish. It's one of the most beautiful ideas. And you're trying to show His Excellency you have this ingenuity in your culture. It's in the landscape. It's embedded in it. And when your kings used to go into their entranceways, look at what they did. Look at the entrances that you're actually doing in your contemporary buildings. Why don't you do this? The whole thing of entry is something that needs to be ritualized, and it's beautiful. And the whole thing of interior space. And then the spaces between. The spaces between are remarkable. And the terrace spaces. They're simple common sense laws that are universal, and how you structure landscape and how you filter landscape. And this is almost the last picture. I think it's almost the last picture. Knowing when to stop. We cannot build housing for the world at the number you're talking about when they built. We have to plant the seed responsibly, and we have to do it collectively. No one firm of architects can do it. We have to pool our resources, and no building system can do it. We have to actually alter our mindset, alter our way of thinking, and deal with all those human and spiritual aspects that Doshi dealt with if we're going to deal with the unbelievable ingenuity of people. This is a drawing. When do you stop? The drawing's finished because I wanted to stop there. We need to know how to stop. And then when you go through any of your cities, this happens to be in the town near Hampi, just look at the incredible way in which buildings just grow. And it's exactly what's happened at the housing of Doshi. People have suddenly realized, I can't live 3 stories. I'm not used to it. I'm from the town. I can build 1 story and I can build upstairs. But then you realize the value of your land, and if you build another story, you can actually get a rental situation. So what I'm saying is that the lessons from ordinary people about culture, pleasure of use, and adaptation to change are there to be learnt. That's the India and Africa and Latin America where I go to learn those ideas. And in South Africa, we have 15-meter frontage for a house because it was promised to the people. You can go to 6 meters because the whole of Europe and the Middle East is 6 meters. So we make the same mistakes again and again. And we mustn't make the mistake with motor cars. Thank you very much.